Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to the Every Australian Counts Community Forum about the NDIS cuts, what's at risk, and what we do next. I want to begin by welcoming everyone and also acknowledging
Zoom
the
workplace.
traditional owners of the
14 people
land
have joined the
that
meeting.
we are
Always allow
all.
HTTPS. Your open link button. Join from Zoom meet.
Okay, we need some mute people. Right. Please stay on mute. Um, I'd like to just acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today and pay respect to elders past and present and any Aboriginal people who might be with us today. I also want to acknowledge all of the people with disability and family members and our allies who have fought so hard for our NDIS. I know that this is a difficult time for our community. We're all trying hard to understand the bill that is currently in Parliament, and we're coming together today to hopefully get a better understanding and to work out what we need to do to defend our NDIS. So thank you for being here. Uh, I'd like to just quickly do some housekeeping. So can we move to that slide? We have Auslan interpreters and live captions available. Um, we have we are recording the workshop today, and so if you don't want to be recorded, please keep your camera off and use a nickname. If speaking that you don't want it said, let us know before you talk. You can use the chat at any time for questions or comments, and we will have time after our speakers present to hear directly from you, so you can put your hand up to have a say. Thanks, Amber. Next slide. We're going to do a quick poll. And the reason for this poll is because we want to draw your attention to the current inquiry that is occurring on the NDIS bill. And the question is, will you be making a submission to the inquiry? Can we put the poll up now? We want to know if you'll be making a submission, if you've already made a submission, and if you're planning to make a submission. We'll just give you 10 seconds to complete that survey, and then we will put those results up. Okay, 5 more seconds, and then I will end the poll. Thank you. I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share the results. Can everyone see the results? We can see from these results that 16% have already made a submission. Well done to all of those people. Excellent work. 41% will be making a submission. Well done to you as well. And 43% are feeling unsure about where to start. Well, you're in the right place because we're going to ensure that all of the people who are intending to make a submission and are unsure where to start, that you know what to do by the end of today. So thank you for that, sharing that information. Okay, on to our speakers, is that right? Anda, just can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, I'd like to introduce our first two speakers who many of you will already know. The presenters we have today are Belinda Kochanowska from Intrepidus Law and Naomi Anderson from Villamanta Legal Center. Welcome, Belinda and Miranda. Sorry, and Naomi. Thank you for being here today. Over to you.
Thanks, George. Do we have Belinda?
Yes, hello.
Hooray!
I made it.
Welcome, thank you.
Where do we start, Naomi?
Do we start by having a cry?
Well, I was going to say, look, everyone, just everyone needs to just take a bit of take care of yourselves at the moment. This is hard going. This is very tough information to hear and to accept, and it's I still haven't got over the shock, to be frank with you all. Every time I read these amendments, I'm shocked on a new level. And if I don't laugh, I'll end up crying. So I think it's fair to say, Naomi, that this is quite the philosophical shift in the scheme. This is not going, if this bill passes, this is not the scheme as we know it. That would be fair to say.
It's not the scheme that was envisaged. It's not the scheme that Parliament voted for in 2013. It's not the scheme that we all fought for. It's not the scheme that the Productivity Commission recommended. These changes are so significant that it will be unrecognisable.
It's almost as though they should rename the scheme to something else. This is not the NDIS. And the more and more we pick apart the proposed bill, these are proposed amendments to the Act, this is not the NDIS. My fear with this, and we need to be open about this, and I don't want to unnecessarily scare the community, but we need to confront what is being proposed here by our current government is looking down the barrel of any minister of the day, and that could be of any political party, remember, in the future, being able to control the scheme without scrutiny and without checks and balances, to an extent that my fear is that what this is setting up for is almost a return to block funding, a return to reinstitutionalization, the unpacking and undoing of all of the incredible achievements and advancements we've made in community inclusion of people with disability, back to something that's very constrained, controlled, and just focused on the dollar. Am I being extreme there, Naomi?
No, it's I know we've all been focused on the bill, and the bill is important, and it's what the inquiry is about. But anyone who's already made their submission, or anyone who has some spare time, sorry, the fun part is in the explanatory memorandum at the back where they explain their thinking. It's detailed, and it actually tells you how little they understand about how this works. Comments like that the people who have the most community-based funding in their plans are people living in SDA and SIL. Well, yes, because they have the highest needs. So then when the policy response to that is to cut community participation funding by 50%, because the people with the highest needs have the highest funding, I'm not sure how that makes sense. There are so many aspects of what is included in that reasoning that are troubling, that I think while we do need to focus on the bill and we do need to talk about what the impacts will be, the fundamental premises behind it also need to be considered, because that's what's driving this response. And if Parliament can't understand that the assumptions that they're coming from are flawed, it is arguable that this is necessary regardless of the consequences. And that's the other element that I think we need to make clear, what those consequences will be.
So I think what I find quite striking with that, Naomi, is the ability of the minister to essentially discriminate between participant cohorts of people in the scheme. Essentially, and I don't think there's any way of better articulating that than it is discriminating against treating people differently, different cohorts differently, potentially. That's the extent these powers, these abilities to cap funding levels for a particular group on the scheme without appeal, and simply with the minister having a regard to the safety of that group, but no other checks and balances, no other measures or scrutiny over those decisions. And so
we can talk about that a little, Belinda. Can we talk about the powers the minister will have, the shift from an independent agency to the minister, which means a shift away from parliamentary scrutiny, effectively.
Yeah.
And how that works and what the impacts of that likely are. Maybe if we start with that.
For sure. So what I understand, and this is a non-exhaustive list, and it's a very long list actually with our submissions that we'll be providing. We're providing and we'll share it publicly actually. It's a whole table of all of the new minister powers. But essentially what the minister may now do without having to go back to Parliament for scrutiny is they can reduce funding for any specified group of supports by up to 99%. They can cause an alteration to a participant's plan without a right to review, and that's Section 50A. And this is something, if this bill is passed, you'll hear more about people having Section 50A successor plans, and those plans will be the plans that are going to address, those auto extensions. But those Section 50A plans will not be reviewable decisions. They'll be able to end plans early, prescribe conditions under which, setting the price guide. That's the big one. So setting the price guide will now sit with the minister. Determining who is and who is not an NDIS provider. Prescribing circumstances in which a person is taken to be fully treated. Now that's for access to the scheme. Declaring any class of persons, conditions, or excluded impairments which are ineligible to access for the scheme and can have a participant status immediately revoked. That's an enormous power. Authorising automated decision making by computer program, including for decisions involving the exercise of a discretion. It doesn't end there.
That's probably a good list to start with. So maybe if we talk about how that works in practice, there's a nice little section at the end of the explanatory memorandum that talks about the rolling out of determinations and renewals. So one of the changes is that there'll be no more rollovers, as we've seen previously. Your end date of your plan, or the reassessment date of your plan comes and they haven't done a reassessment. And we all know that this peaked during COVID and has not really improved a great deal since. They set it up so that plans would just roll over. You'd get a longer plan with pro rata funding added into it. So anything that was left in there, you could still access. So that will end. Once that date passes, the old plan will end and a new plan will start. And that new plan will include any of the determinations that have been made. So any changes to pricing, any cuts to a type of funding, any of those changes. But what it does say is that after October, which is when that will start, there will be a slow rollout of those determinations. So of the renewals and determinations, they're expecting about 1 in 6. But then subsequently, there's a 7-month period where they say the other 5 out of 6 people will transition across, which tells me there's no way they're waiting for the end date, because there's no way that 5/6 of participants have their end date in 7 months. What they're clearly planning to do, and they talk about their ICT being able to implement this, is have automation that will create an end date, which they can do under a variation, which then forces everybody else onto the renewal plan with the determination in place. So it's not any one of these powers, it's all of them combined that starts to look like this is going to be a lot. It's going to seem like nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden, bang. Because you don't get a new plan when that happens.
No, that's right.
You don't know that it's happened necessarily. But suddenly you can't access your funding because you've run out, because it's been cut by half.
And that's the Section 50A, what in the amendments, the successor plan. This will become new language that will, if this bill passes, that we will have to get used to hearing. Oh, no, you can't review that because you've got a successor plan. You've got a Section 50A successor plan. And that is not a
successor plans, as I understand it, will be to deal with people who have already transitioned, so they've already had a renewal, but we want to catch them in the next set of determinations, so you can have a renewal of a renewal, neither of which is reviewable.
It's not reviewable. So your only pathways there would be Section 47 or the Section 48 change in circumstances, which, as we know, with the reform bill, is going to be more tightly narrowed, and the agency will have an expanded amount of time to consider a change of circumstances from 21 days to 90 days.
And at the end of that 90 days, if they still haven't done it, there's no way to force them. So currently, if the 21 days passes and they haven't done the reassessment, it's a deemed decision. It's deemed that they declined to do that, which is a decision that can be reviewed. After 90 days of not reviewing that, you can take it to the tribunal, and that's where you can create the pressure for them to do something. However, now, taking away the deeming of that decision, the 90 days comes and goes, there's nothing you can do. Another 90 days comes and goes, another 90. Clearly, all of these measures combined are intended to hold people in place, cease reviews, cease appeals, until we get to new framework planning. That's
like a freeze.
The combined effect.
Like a freeze.
While bits are cut.
That's right.
And
freeze,
sliced over here, cut, and a trim over here.
And then here's your new framework rolling in. That's a really good way of everyone trying to conceptualize this. But what's proposed, it's like they're going to be able to freeze everything, very limited review. You can't appeal that freeze, but you might get a change of circumstances or a variation in very limited circumstances and extreme circumstances, I'd suggest. So we're frozen. The minister can then go cut a whole cohort of people or a whole support by whatever it wants to, up to 99%. Right? And then we're going to roll out the new framework, which is the support needs assessment tool. This is not the scheme that you enjoy today.
It's a scheme where the minister can basically change how the scheme operates in a
The
moment.
minister will become a czar of the NDIS essentially. The control, the power and the control is extraordinary. The scope of it is extraordinary. And that's problematic, taking a step away from the NDIS just in terms of us as a country and what we, think is okay to allow ministers of the day to have in terms of power. That's not scrutinised and unchecked. That's another question, a bigger question. But for the community to understand how crucially important it is to be very, very noisy about this. We have to really, and I'm sure Senator Jordon Steele-John will talk more about that, and Dr. George is, he's the leader in that, but this is a crisis point. I don't want to over exaggerate it. I don't think I am. This is shocking. These just change, the audacity of the change is incredible.
And I think it's really important that people making submissions, people talking to their MPs are able to explain what that looks like for them. Just assume that your MP doesn't understand how the scheme works, doesn't understand how it's very complex. We all know that. We all know that it takes a long time to get your head around how all of the pieces combine and how the processes work. And they've been told by the media and by everything that's happening that this is necessary. And it's sounding like, you're going to go out to coffee half as many times. Take one for the team. And it's about future sustainability, but sustainability doesn't occur in isolation. So the minister can only make these cuts if it is necessary for scheme sustainability, but they've already made the argument to Joe Public that sustainability is a problem. Sustainability operates within the Australian economy, not within just the NDIS. There is also the question of how much income tax is being generated. There's also the question of how many people have moved off welfare payments into jobs. All of the effects of the NDIS create the sustainability within the Australian economy. So arguing the sustainability is really difficult for an individual. But what is really possible for an individual is to talk about how this impacts you. Because, the minister got up there and said, we're hearing about people going out in the community and their support workers just scrolling through their mobile phone. Yeah, okay, that's not okay. It's not acceptable. None of us thinks that's great. But you don't fix that by locking people in their homes. And the other issue is it doesn't take away the fact that that person needs to be supported. So who's going to be supporting them in their home? If you're talking about people in group homes, which is the ones they're pointing to having the biggest budgets, okay, well, they're not out in the shops with their support workers scrolling through the phone. They're at their home with their shared supports scrolling through their phone. It's cheaper, but it's not safer and it's not better. So we need to be talking about, what does it look like? What do you use your community participation funding for? Are you going to see your doctor? Are you going to share your trip to the doctor with another participant? Hey, gynecologist, great to see you. Here's my neighbour Barney. He also has social community participation. He was going out to visit his grandparents, but apparently we have to go together. So he's coming here and I'm going to see his grandparents, and I hope we have enough time. These are the things we need to be talking about.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's those really practical day-to-day dignities too, Naomi. And that's what it is. To imagine being tethered to another person, for every aspect of your life, is incredible. And so, and I think this is what is hard for our politicians to conceptualize, or even for people who do not have lived experience of disability to conceptualize. That these are basic dignities. These are not luxuries. They're not luxuries. What I fear with this as well is the impact that this is going to have on unpaid carers in particular, who, given the extraordinary scope of the minister's power to cap supports or the intensity of supports, right? It's well within it would be within the minister's power, for example, to say there's no more one-to-one supports. Full stop. There's just no more one-to-one supports. It's just 1 to 2. That's the maximum support. That is what this power potentially can allow, is for the minister to say, well, no, or there's no 2 to 1 at all. That's just not something that NDIS will fund, full stop. Or, with SDA, for example, there's no more sole occupancy SDA. No more sole occupancy SDA, that's it. And so what will happen there practically is, there will be families, or there will be, if a participant's lucky to have a family, right, in their life, who may go, well, I don't want my loved one to be back in a group situation because we did that before. My loved one was abused, neglected. I refuse to allow that to happen again. And so what will happen is, likely, that person will end up staying longer at home in the family, not enjoying life at, life stage appropriate transition into independent living. And ultimately, the family or someone in the family will be providing that care unpaid. Now, that may really suit the bottom line of politicians, but that drastically unwinds a lot of great advancement that the scheme has given people with disability and their families in terms of independence and the dignity of that. What is so striking to me is how it's unwinding all of those great advancements that were achieved by the scheme, that the scheme was promising. I've made this comment to other people before. It's almost like this. What's happening to the scheme is like a mother devouring its own child. It's shocking.
Thank you, Naomi and Belinda. I want to ask you a difficult question that I think that it needs to be asked. Do you think that as a result of this legislation, if it does go through, that people's lives will be at risk?
People will die.
George,
People
I've
are
spent the
already
last
dying.
couple of days
People are
reading
already.
coroner's reports. It's not happy reading. What strikes me is, although the coroner reviews around a third of deaths in Victoria are people who live in SDA because they're required to, very few of them actually go to the root cause, because they look at the end when the person died and the doctor says, well, they had pneumonia and they died, natural causes. Some of them, and mostly that's where there were family involved, actually say, let's start back 9 months ago when this happened, and they needed, in one case, some mobility equipment to get them up and moving so they could breathe more, move more, retain function, get out in the community, have a life. All the things that we know are beneficial for health and well-being didn't happen. The person got weaker and tireder and sadder, presumably. 2 weeks before they died, the funding for the mobility equipment was approved. That is what will happen, is things will be so hard to get approved and people will deteriorate in the meantime, and people will get so exhausted and overwhelmed. The coroner won't notice that suddenly you've got all of these people with pneumonia who didn't have pneumonia 9 months ago, 2 years ago, but we've cut their funding for therapeutic supports. We've cut their funding to get out in the world and do things. We've cut their funding because we don't think that that equipment should be funded at that rate. And death of 1,000 cuts, yes, people will die.
If you're waiting 90 days for the agency to make a decision on a change in circumstances too, that's a long time to
Yeah,
wait.
what happens if you are living with a family member, a partner, a child, a parent, and they died and they did a lot of your support?
Yeah.
90 days is a very, very long time.
Thank you. That's very, very concerning. And any other last words not last words, additional words that you'd like to share with that community?
Stick together. We've got each other. tell everybody you can, because it's not only about the members of parliament, senators, it's also about the community. The community perception has shifted, and I am quite confident that for most of the people here, if they told somebody, this is what will happen to me if this goes through, they'll say, no, it won't affect people like you. It's those other ones. There is this idea suddenly that there are these other disabled people who are somehow shonky, lying, grifters who are just stealing from the system because the community doesn't understand. And we need them to come along as much as we do Parliament.
Yeah, we have to stick together as a community. Our strength is in numbers, but we also need to look after each other at the same time, and support each other at the same time. But we need to get loud with this as well. And we need to protest what's going on, what's being proposed. It's multifaceted what we need to do. Unfortunately, we're all really tired, and I feel the battle has only just begun. And we're just all exhausted from all these constant submissions. I mean, there's been other submissions that we've had to do leading up to this, just submission after submission. So we need to support each other in terms of our energy levels. And I think be smart with how we use our energy and how we direct it. And I think that public awareness, we need to actually combat the media narrative in a way. We need to create our own media narrative. It's almost like we need to flood Australia with these amazing stories about the scheme, how it
And the good it does.
the good it does, the good it does for participants, the good it does for families, the good it does for the mum next
The
door
community.
to work because of this, right? Like it does an incredible amount of good. It's always touted as something that we're proud of. We should be, that the whole world is envious of the NDIS. Why are we demolishing it then and replacing it with something from the past, a relic of the past? It's astounding. So I think we need to be smart in how we approach it. It's political, it's community grassroots based, like you're talking to your neighbour. Just talk to your next door neighbour. If everyone talked to their next door neighbour, and just and explain what's going on and how terrible this is. When I speak to people on the street, the first thing when I mention the NDIS, this is to like a stranger or at the shops or something, the first thing they say to me is, "Oh, there's just too much rorting, the rorts," and it's like, sorry, do you know of someone who's been rorted? Like, what are these, like this but that is something by osmosis that they've formed a view on because of the media. And that's their idea of the NDIS, that it's one big rort, you know?
Well, I think the government did a really good job in creating that narrative. Absolutely. Thanks, Belinda. We do need
Can I
to,
just say one last thing,
yes.
George? We also need to talk about where this cost goes. If the NDIS stops providing these supports, who's picking them up? Because yes, it's the family, it's also the health system, it's also the justice system, it's the mental health system, all of the other systems that are going to have to pick it up. People need to realize if you need surgery in 12 months, you might well be waiting for quite some time because there's no beds in your hospital because of all of the NDIS participants who are stuck there because they don't have enough supports.
Yep,
This is not cost cutting, it's cost shifting.
it is.
Well said. Thank you. 100% agree. I want to now invite Senator Jordon Steele-John to present to us. And we know that this legislation is very concerning, Jordan, but we'd like you to explain to us what happens next. You're in the Parliament and you have a lot of excellent knowledge and experience fighting bad legislation. So we're keen to hear from you. And I also want to mention that we did invite other sides of politics to be here today, and Jordon was the only person that accepted our invitation. So thank you for being here, Jordon.
It's amazing to be here, George, and thank you for the invite.
Thank you. We've got this bill before Parliament, and can you help people understand where it is in the parliamentary process and what happens next?
Yeah, I absolutely can. First of all, I just want to pick up on something that Belinda shared in their contribution. And I want to acknowledge the heaviness of the moment. Like I think all of us have been fighting for a really for many of us, for the entirety of our lives, for people in positions of power, whether they be our families or our friends, our bosses, our teachers, the doctors that would see us at hospital, or the governments that we vote for, to see us as human beings and to recognize our humanity and respect our rights and listen when we speak. And it's really, really tough to be once again in a situation where somebody, in this case a government, has a bunch of views in their minds about who we are and what we are, and isn't interested, it seems, in listening to our lived experience or our professional expertise, and where a bunch of people in rooms far away are trying to give themselves more powers to run our lives and silence our voices. And that this comes in a context where we have been fighting and living with the cuts and changes for years now, and have often been invited into spaces by government with the promise of consultation and co-design, only to have our labour dismissed when we don't come up with the solutions that people want us to come up with. So we've experienced all of that, and then we've had to sit and watch for years as a government we voted for to protect our NDIS used public funds, public money to commission research to help them figure out how to persuade people to cut the NDIS and to make these changes and to give themselves these powers. And that research that they commissioned, it's a real thing. You can go and Google it online. The Red Bridge research that was commissioned, that found that the community actually really supported the NDIS. There was a strong social license, is how they described it, as strong as Medicare, and that the only way that they could solicit some conditional support for these changes that they wanted to make, these cuts and powers they wanted to give themselves, was to talk about fraud. And so what we've also had to uh, endure for years now is the media and the government amplifying stories, often out of context, often nonsense, that have painted us and our families in the worst lights, normalized some of the most ableist and just wrong thought processes about disability. And we're now copying it worse than ever. Like, people are getting screamed at in the streets and in the comment sections, and even people we thought were on our side are coming to us and saying, really uninformed things about us, our lives, and our NDIS. And that hurts. And I just want to give us a moment to acknowledge that feeling, because um, part of what the government is doing here is they not only think that us and our families are an easy target, they also believe, I think, that by rolling all of this out at once, they can kind of make us feel helpless. And that helplessness starts when we have these feelings of hurt and anxiety and fear and concern but we don't think that we should have. We think we've got to keep pushing on, pushing through. We can't let them beat us, and we accidentally play into it by not acknowledging it, not talking about it, particularly in spaces where a lot of us feel the same things. And there's an antidote to isolation in the understanding that the feelings that we're feeling are not feelings that we're feeling alone. And so I will also share with you that I have those feelings. Like I sit in a space where I look at the media reporting and have conversations with people, and you can feel that beginning of helplessness and hopelessness come over you. What I'm here today to talk about is where we can move together and how we can move from a feeling of of helplessness and hopelessness to a feeling of empowerment. And I think that begins by acknowledging two truths. One, that um, as much as we would absolutely love that every one of the 502 incredible human beings on this call tonight replaced every single one of the politicians and bureaucrats in the federal government, and that we then unilaterally could strike a pen through the whole damn lot of this bill and send it into the dustbin of history. Um, we That's not going to happen tonight. I'll dream of the day when we storm the barricades together and get to that point, but it's not going to happen tonight. So beyond our control is ultimately whether this bill passes or not, because we're not all in Parliament together. So that bit is beyond our control. What is within our control, and I think this is where our power can come and where we can break the cycle of helplessness and anxiety, when we acknowledge that the ultimate outcome of this legislation, passing or not, is not actually something we get to march into the chamber and vote on. What is in our control is how do we use ourselves in the next 35 days? Because it is on the 35th day, on the 2nd of July, from now, 35 days from now until the 2nd of July, if what Google has told me when I looked this up 2 minutes ago is correct. That is the day on which the government hopes to pass this bill and have it done. So that's the time period that we've got. And we get to decide, each of us, how we use ourselves and our energy in that 35-day period. And there is no right or wrong way to use yourself and your time in that space of time. If you have already come as far as you feel like you can go, if submissions or phone calls or emails are things that you've already got to your upper limit on, then that's okay. Lending a supportive comment to a disabled person that does have that in the tank, or an organization or an advocate, that helps too. And I want to be really clear that, one of the ways the government feels like they win these things is they burn us all out by creating a dynamic where nobody feels like they can ever take a moment or a day to rest, because then that's betraying the cause. And then people's nerves just fray further and further, and we begin fighting with each other. And while we're fighting each other, they just get on with business. So, first of all, is to give ourselves the permission. If you need to take a couple of these 35 days to rest and recover and to think nothing of the NDIS bill, then that is absolutely okay. For those who have that energy in the tank, or indeed that's the best way to cope with the uncertainty or the frustration that you feel, and I'm very much in that category, right? I work these things through by having something tangible to do. There are tangible things that you can do. And I'm going to put a link now in the chat to where we've created a couple of resources for people so that they can make so you can make a submission to the inquiry, and also call some of your local MPs or your key decision makers with a bit of a guide on how to do that. So I've just popped that in the chat now, because one of the things within our control and within that 35-day period is how we raise our voices and apply pressure to those people that will be making those decisions, will be voting on the bill at some point during that 35-day window. And there is incredible power in reaching out to your MPs and telling them what you want them to do in really clear, explicit language. Sometimes we feel like we have to over explain ourselves when we reach out to our MPs and give them a huge amount of validating, explaining information. Actually, they work for us. MPs work for the communities that elect them. And if you don't want this bill to pass, or if you think that it should, at the very least, be withdrawn and consulted on more, or that there should be additional inquiries into what it will mean for people, then you can just contact them and say that. And there's some additional information that you can include that's in those guides that I've just linked to. But they work for you, and you can talk to them in that clear-cut language. It is so valuable at this time and in this period to contact your local MPs if you have the energy to do so. One of the things politicians and the political system conspires to do is to give people the impression that politicians don't listen to people that contact them because they don't respond to people that contact them. And I can tell you that they do listen. It's just often the people they don't respond to are the people they don't want to continue to be annoyed by. But it does have an impact if you are making those calls, if you are sending those emails, if you are giving them the opportunity to talk to you or understand what this could mean for your family. That does make a difference. That does agitate. That does irritate. And ultimately, that's then something that they bring up with their bosses, with the ministers and the higher up decision makers. So contact your MP. That's one of the key ways. If you've got it in the tank that you can use yourself in this time. Another key way is to make a submission to the inquiry. It's a powerful thing to do, and one of the things that makes me really clear about the fact that it is powerful is that Labour didn't want to do it. This government did not want to have an inquiry into the bill, and it did not want to have an inquiry where there was hearings. They fought every single step of the way against both things because they do not want to create a forum where people can have their say on what they're trying to push through. Now we succeeded in securing an inquiry that will run until the 15th of June. Submissions are open until the 1st of June, and there will be 3 hearings. Where people will be able to give evidence in person about the bill, their concerns, what they want to see change. And if you think that 3 hearings is not enough, or the 15th of June is not long enough, or that the 1st of June as a submission date isn't long enough, I agree. I think that's absolutely outrageous. And we put forward an August report date so that we could have more time. And unfortunately, the major parties were not on board with that idea. So make that submission. Again, I've linked to how you can, a guide to how you can do that, and some of the things to bring up. One of the best things to do is to just share your story. And then if you think that this bill should be withdrawn, or that the inquiry should be re-established after it reports, or basically that it shouldn't be rammed through, say that really clearly, and say how, share how some of the government control aspects that Belinda has flagged concern you or would change your experience of daily life. The other thing that can be really valuable to do, and Naomi, I think, mentioned it as well, is talk with your community about this. Like I said, they spent the research they commissioned to figure out how to push this narrative of fraud cost about $300,000 or $400,000 to commission multiple focus groups. And that's why we've been hearing a lot about fraud, because they think it makes it more palatable to people to push this kind of thing through. And one of the things that I've been saying when I've been having conversations, and I've been having a lot of conversations with people who have these views. I was speaking to a couple in Western Australia a couple of days ago. They stopped me in a cafe and we chatted about the NDIS. And they led out with a common refrain that I'm hearing a lot, which was, oh, well, but, there is a lot of shonks involved, and, it is costing too much, isn't it? And we do need to get the orders out of the system. And what I said back to them is, Well, in terms of shonks and rorts and fraud, I agree. There is too much fraudulent and shonky behavior going on in the scheme. The perpetrators of that shonky behavior and that fraud are the big providers who are making hundreds of millions of dollars out of the NDIS. They are the primary perpetrators of fraud and shonky behavior and unneeded charge to participants. And it is us as disabled people and our families who are the ones that care about tackling fraud the most. Because when fraud occurs, it's us who lose the services, it's us who are left without. And we have been arguing since the scheme was created for more resources to the Quality and Safeguards Commission to go after the dodgy, big, registered providers who are the primary source of fraud. I'm on an inquiry right now into fraud into the NDIS, and we had the biggest providers come and give evidence to us, including Aruma, whose CEO is playing such a public role in pushing this legislation. And I asked them basic questions about their fraud prevention frameworks and the steps that they take to combat fraud and conflicts of interest that exist within their organization. And the best they could give me was, well, we check some payments sometimes. Meanwhile, the Quality and Safeguards Commission and the Fraud Fusion Task Force have resulted in a grand total of 43 successful prosecutions since 2018, so from 2018 to now. And in the last year, they've achieved a grand total of 5 prosecutions for fraud in the NDIS. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. And when you ask the Fraud Fusion Task Force about the 10% of NDIS funding going on potentially on fraud figure, what they say is, oh no, that's not fraud. We never said that was fraud. That's scheme leakage. And scheme leakage includes accidental payments that are then rectified. But the fact that they've been rectified doesn't get knocked off the potential number. So it's absolute nonsense, the figures they're producing, because their purpose is to make participants the villain rather than big providers. So we can push back hard on that fraud framing. And I think we can do that successfully. In the last couple of days, I successfully managed to order the government to give us some clarity around the number of people they're intending to kick off the scheme using the powers of the Senate. And we now know, and it's been reported in The Guardian, that the 160,000 figure is not correct. The number they project is actually about 250,000 people. So that the last thing that I would say is that when we think about how to use ourselves in this next 35 days, one of the useful things to remember is that there are so many people in our broader community who, if you ask them whether what the government should do is kick off this many people, remove supports from them, and just leave them with nothing, their answer would be absolutely not. I didn't know that's what they were proposing to do. That is when I've sat down and had these conversations with people, that's where they land, even conservative people. And that's why the government's making such an effort to have the conversation not be about that 240,000, 250,000 people and what the impact will be on them. So I would say the last thing would be is to remain connected to the fact, A, that there are a lot of us experiencing this together, that the feelings that we're having, wherever we fall on that feeling spectrum, they are all okay. They are all a natural, normal response to what is being done to us by this bill and what has been done to us in the years leading up to it. Second, that we are maybe villainized in the eyes of the AFR and Sky News and all the rest of it, but the broad Australian community, though they've heard this thing about fraud and waste and when you reconnect with them as people, they reconnect with their own humanity, and are willing to come back on board with us as human beings that deserve to have our rights supported. And the last thing is, if you have the energy, and you have the capacity, agitate, agitate, agitate in the next 35 days. Make the call, send the email, rock up to the office, organize the protest, speak online, use your online platforms to tell your stories. And let's make sure that at the end of that 35 days, whatever faces us on the 36th day, we feel that we have done what we wanted to do and what we can be proud of as a community, as we kind of go together then into the next chapter. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jordan, for that. I might also add that I think that the message that we need to put out to our community, because we need everyone to speak out about this bill, is to say the NDIS is there for every Australian who at any point in their lives might end up with a disability. And they are going to want the NDIS to have the ability to provide them with the funding and support that they need to get out of debt or to be part of the community. It's for every Australian.
Yeah.
It's an insurance scheme. That is the whole point of it. So if they cut it back the way they need to, it won't be there for them when they need it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think you're so right, George. And I think that's particularly a message, and contact more broadly is something that is useful to do with MPs that you might not have thought it was worth your time in the past. Like the Liberals are really key to this. Like if in terms of the numbers of passing this legislation or getting another inquiry or getting some amendments up that make it less damaging, it very much hinges on the Liberals realizing that this is actually an impact on the community beyond even what they were proposing to do
Mm.
and beyond what even they can stomach. And I think that direct contact with Liberal MPs, with the opposition leader Angus Taylor, and particularly with local MPs, if you have a local Liberal MP, is really valuable at this time too.
Thank you. And I know you're probably the only person in the room here that has a vote in Parliament right now. I want to ask you a question. I've been watching the news. I've seen that there's a lot of talk about the the capital gains tax. There's very little talk about NDIS,
Hmm.
and we're seeing the Liberal Party use their influence to say, well, if you put out an inquiry for the capital gains tax, we will, might pass the NDIS legislation.
Mm.
Could it be that we could ask the Greens to do the same and say that we won't pass your capital gains tax if you push this NDIS law that will harm disabled people who need the NDIS?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think I've seen some of that reporting, George, and I think before I got into
Really? I thought that was just me. Okay, go on.
yeah, no, no, no. I've seen that, and I before I got into politics, I would never believe that sometimes I know it's the colloquialism that sometimes media just make things up, but I was surprised to see those kind of Jordan's in negotiations with XYZ stories because yeah, I've just been sitting reading through the bill and preparing for estimates next week, so that doesn't necessarily have any basis in fact, but I would say, look, the Parliament's got a lot on its agenda, the Senate's got a lot on its agenda, and if people feel that one of the things that we should do as the Greens, and the same with any political party, is prioritize not passing the NDIS bill over anything else in the next sitting, then people should absolutely feel free to reach out and tell us that that's your view. Because I think when I think about capital gains tax and some of the other things the government is doing, um, there's also the piece on my mind of the fact that the disabled people are very much impacted by the housing crisis too, and some of these changes are looking to address those things. It's not something we've really put a lot of thought into because you can't. Well, both the Liberal and the Labour Party would always rather do a deal with each other. That's the other thing I should say. If given a choice between any other pathway forward and coming to an agreement between themselves, they'll always do that. So sometimes when these things are floated in newspapers, it's actually part of a double or triple bluff to try to get the Labour or Liberal Party to give the other one a better deal in the negotiation they're doing with each other. But it's good baseline. If you think the Greens should go into the Parliament and prioritise NDIS, keeping the bill from passing or an additional inquiry over, say, giving a speedy passage to the CGT changes, definitely reach out and tell us that if that is your view. And it's also totally fine if it's the other view too. If it's like, well, I think we should get these changes through as quickly as possible because we need to tackle the housing crisis. But it's generated a lot of community debate in the last couple of days.
Thank you. I am going to now go to questions. I want to also just make it clear that we do need to wrap up at 3:30. And so if you have a question, please keep it brief. And also, we'll do our best to get to you, but we can't promise we will. So, I've got hands up. No, I can't see the hands. Oh, there they are. Wayne, and then Sarah, and then Jackie. Wayne, over to you.
Yeah, Wayne speaking, Jordon, and George, and Naomi, and Belinda. The problem that I find, why are we not setting ourselves to continue to show the failings of the NDIS itself? I'll give you 1 minute quick things, and I'll shut up. The overreach of service providers. We've got a situation that the service providers have got their support coordinators. They do the right thing. The support coordinator uses another service provider for their support, but they make sure they keep it in with themselves so that the whole thing is as is. We end up with a situation that, especially in far north Queensland, because I'm in far north Queensland, that we got nowhere to go. We've got the overreach and no transparency from NDIA delegates. You put in for a minor change in your say for a wheelchair. Yeah. The biggest thing is this: they come back, they say yes, you can have the wheelchair, but they've cut your funding. So the overreach of them, the cost that must do for them, because we go back and we resubmit to get our plan reapplied to. The control over pricing. Let's just go to building renovations.
Right, hey, Wayne.
Yes.
Wayne, I don't think we have time to go into all the problems of the NDIS. I think that we need to focus on the NDIS bill today and all the things that we need to ensure that the bill meets the needs of our community. So,
George, I'll shut up because I'll show you respect. But the whole thing is this: we can talk about the bill, we can talk about everything that goes on, but the way the NDIS is run and the wastage of money that they are doing with the system itself, we need to start fighting that. We will not beat this NDIS until such times as we bring into the problems that the NDIS itself has got in its own system, and we might as well forget all about it. I've sat on that many of these schemes that people talk about how the bill's working, what's going to happen in the bill and everything. We need to nail this down to where all the funding that's wasted in having to use go back to the AAT and all that with lawyers and that. But anyhow, George, I pay you full respect, but we need to start getting into the nitty gritty of how bad they run this scheme, and then that. So thank you for taking my statement. But I'll get off here now. And Jordon, I hope that you contact me, because I've tried to contact you a dozen times and you never get back.
Oh,
All right,
I'm
that's
sorry
fine.
about that, Wayne. I'll if you send me through your surname, I'll follow it up with my team and see why your email slipped through the cracks there. And I'll just say, so we can move on. I would, if you haven't already, jump on either Facebook or Instagram and film a video of yourself talking exactly as you've done that and share it in your community, because that can help counter, all of the noise with all of the different other perspectives.
Thank you, Sarah, Jackie, and then Vic. Vic. Sarah. Sarah. Okay. Okay, go, Sarah.
Thank you, Judge and Senator Steele-John. Will social civic community participation funding be reduced for people who have significant permanent disabilities? How will people who are ineligible for NDIS or removed access those supports? What do those foundational supports look like? And do people with disabilities who already have a diagnosis require to have a functional capacity assessment every 12 months? These are big concerns, and it's a worry because we already have people with disabilities who are stuck at home, socially isolated, cannot leave the house. Even myself, I'm accessing services in Victoria. I can't access them in New South Wales. And if we have all these changes in this bill go through, it's going to put more pressure on families and stress. And for many people who don't have informal supports, those people will be left with no supports if they're removed from NDIS, where there's no like-for-like services similar to what NDIS already has.
Sarah, these are very, very good points that you make. I encourage you to put them in a submission if you haven't already. Anything else to say on that, Jordon?
I can confirm that the bill seeks to make a 50% across the board cut to those types of supports, regardless of whether you are regardless of your disability type. If you've got that in your plan, whoop, 50% will go. And to every other question you put there, Sarah, those are precisely my questions too. Where are people supposed to go? And I think that's one of the biggest things that the government refuses to answer, because it kind of feels like at this point they don't care. They just want us off their financial books. But as Belinda and Naomi pointed out, this is not a cost-saving thing to do. This is cost shifting, because other levels of government will pick up the cost, or people will do it unpaid. Family members, friends will take on even more unpaid work with all of the bad flow-through impacts of that.
Thank you, Jackie, and then Vic.
Kamu panggil kita. No, me.
Jackie?
Jackie.
Donald.
Hello.
Hello.
3 points. I'm talking about general public perception. They're used to the term fraud. They use the term fraud a lot when you talk to general public. I lost a very good friend, a friend of nearly 40 years on the weekend, who was over at my place for lunch. And I was impressing on him the importance of this bill and what it meant. I lost a good friend. He was the same friend I was telling you about, Jordon, who's a supporter. A supporter. General public, when they talk about fraud, they're talking about also people on the NDIS that they don't believe should be on the NDIS. So when the public talk about fraud, they're talking about participants on the scheme as well, doing something illegal, getting the NDIS when, in their opinion, they shouldn't. So I'll just leave that there. It's a really hard battle. Second step, further to that, everyone's under the cost of living pressures at the moment. Everyone's feeling it. So general public really doesn't think much of us on NDIS because we're getting something extra on top, even though we can only spend it on really particular things that they can't. But we're getting something extra that they're not in an environment of cost of living pressures. That's another important thing. To the Greens, Jordon, respectfully, do some cost analysis. You're a supporter. What are the potential downstream costs of taking these many people off? And that pops up over here in the other systems because we know the need doesn't disappear. And go back to the party and sort of use that as a way to influence them getting on board with it. We know the CGT costs and all that are like this much compared to the NDIS is this much cost-wise. And the last point I wanted to make, we need some kind of independent, non-government, I don't know what, honest harm tracker. I know people have set up harm trackers, but we need to track these changes, track the deaths, track anyone who was anyone who was on the NDIS that got kicked off. Where else were they spending money, public money? Where else were they accessing crisis or doing all these things? We need to track those participants.
No difference.
Yeah.
And the cost that it's actually causing elsewhere in the system.
No,
lives.
It's great. It's good feedback, Jackie. I think on your first point, for people who we might come across who have those examples in their head, like they may or may not be based on reality. They might be based on not a full understanding of the person's situation, and how you tackle it is very much based on what your relationship with that person is. But I've found one of the most effective ways to kind of engage in that conversation is to not argue about whether that person was real or not or whatever, but actually go, okay, hang on. So what you're saying is because one person that you know of, maybe did something wrong or got something that you don't feel is appropriate, you think everybody should be punished for that, do you? Like that's because that's what they're proposing. And people say, oh no, that's not. That's not what we want at all. So I think just actually sometimes you can go with them in the thought experiment, and then they realize that the solution shouldn't be punishing a whole for the wrong actions of a particular person. And then on the costing stuff, I would love to cost second order effects. It's something we've been trying to get the Parliamentary Budget Office, which is the people that costs proposals to do. They refuse to cost second order effects. And so the best we can go with is at the moment, the per capita report calculations that for every $1 invested in the NDIS, $2.25 are returned to the economy and economic activity. We know that between 2022 and today, 82% of all new jobs created in the Australian economy were created in the public sector, with the primary driver being disability and aged care. And we know that already people, overwhelmingly women, are having to do unpaid caring roles, and that will increase with the passage of this bill, leading to them having to reduce work or leave work in order to do that role, reducing their taxable income and so on and so on. So we've got some data around that, but unfortunately we're not able to get that kind of second order effect research, although I wish we could.
Thank you. Vic and then Matthew.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Hi. Listen, Jordon, can I ask you quickly? You had a conversation before about your contact with Aruma and the other large, big providers who I believe are all in what's called Alliance 20.
Yes.
It comprises of Northcott, Aruma, Cerebral Palsy Alliance. In my opinion, in the years of watching this folding and working its way out, all I see is they're the main contributors to the drive in the pricing, the main contributors towards this current legislation change. But the math isn't mathing for me if they're going to reduce 50% of community participation. Their day programs as such are going to take a huge cut,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what are they going to get out of it when they lose a huge percentage of their participants that they've got on their books right now, like my own daughter? Because if we get a 50% cut in her community participation, that's 4 days a week gone, and 4 days a week that I will have her. Happy to. Don't like where she currently is anyway and the way they're running their business, because we all know how it runs.
Yeah.
But to me, the math isn't mathing. If they're willing to take a cut there, what have they been promised?
Can I just jump in and tell you very directly, but I'll also
Sure.
give the caveat of, like, I'm not saying any one particular of these organizations is pushing this. I don't have any knowledge of that. I'm just
Yeah.
speaking broadly of why would companies engage in the advocacy they are currently engaging in when they arguably stand to lose, it would seem a chunk of their funding. And I can answer that in 2 words: block funding, or as it is
Yeah.
now being sold to us, commissioning.
Yeah.
Because if I was a private company, what I would do is I would look at commissioning or block funding as the biggest business opportunity in a decade, because it allows me to do exactly what large private companies have been doing when they've interacted for government services since the moment the universe began, which is bid for those services at a rate that their competitors cannot in any way hope to match, because they've got a thick enough profit margin at the moment to take the losses in the 3 to 5 years of the first contract. And then by the time the second round of commissioning begins, all of their other competitors have either been bought by them or have gone under, reducing government choice, and therefore they can go back to the commissioning table and charge twice, 3 times what they previously.
And so are we back to begging for funding again if they go to that?
It's monopolization is what they are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how they used to operate.
Yeah.
That's how they used to operate.
Previously, we had to beg. I think we got 26 grand a year, and then it would get cut every quarter, and they'd go, "Oh, sorry, we can't have you do this. We don't have anyone for you. Your funding's been cut again." Oh my
One
God.
size fits all. And that's a conversation you can have with any liberals you're talking to, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a conservative argument here that says this process of provider commissioning and all that kind of thing, it's a fundamentally anti-competitive practice. And you couldn't get any more of a dictionary definition of government picking winners and losers if you tried.
Yeah.
And in many other areas of the economy and in service delivery, I agree with government either doing the whole thing themselves or a commissioning process, but not when it comes to the people that help us have showers. God damn it, because what matters is whether we're comfortable with them. And that's
this will cover their overheads as well. I mean, they'll have
Right.
a slush fund. They can distribute it how they feel if they go back that way.
Yep.
Okay, well, they're happy.
Great. Thank
Good for
you.
them.
Thanks, Vic. Matthew, and then Sarah. Matthew?
Hello. Hi, Jordan. Hi, everyone. Apologies in advance. I got dodgy Inner West Council. I got dodgy Inner West Council Wi-Fi at the moment, so apologies in advance. Got a question for you, Jordan. In terms of like at the moment, it's been really difficult for someone, for someone like me, as a person who's really engaged in kind of the political process, especially within the state and local government, and have gotten a lot of success over here in New South Wales. But with federal government, especially with a lot of the cuts that have been made, have made it even more difficult in terms of physical capacity. But there's also been so many roadblocks in being able to get lived experience as both a person with a disability and as a carer of people of a family with a disability, to be able to engage in the federal with the federal government in terms of these in terms of some of the recent decisions that have been made. What would be some of your tips to especially in terms of when you're struggling with physical capacity, to be able to get your voice heard in what's been a really difficult federal political climate.
Yeah, so if I understand your question right, Matthew, it's basically if you've got low capacity at the moment, what's the most effective way to use your voice or yourself in this moment? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, excellent. So look, I think that depending on what that spare capacity looks like for you, it can be making a call to your local MP, or other people that are influential in this decision. And I'll put the link again in the chat because I put it a bit earlier. But there's a link to how to make a submission and also how to like go about calling some of those people. I've just popped that in the chat now, so that can be a really useful thing to do. But also, reaching out to your friends and family, like your friends and family, your mum and dad, the people you talk to, kind of maybe only at Christmas because you have some different views, and just seeing if you can have a conversation with them about what your concerns are because they see you as a human being that you're a family member in their eyes, so that can be really useful. And then another good one is just like if you see other disabled people doing this, and I would say also like jumping online to Facebook, TikTok, or Instagram to make a video about your concerns, your experience can also be really powerful. But if all of those seem a bit much, and you still want to do something, well then if you see another disabled person who is taking that step, kind of taking the opportunity to send them a message of support, so that they feel like people are out there, connecting and supporting what they're doing is also a really good thing to do as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Really appreciated it. Because I remember with the previous committee inquiry, the integrity on the National Disability Insurance Scheme, I was going to do a submission on that, but it just
Already
became
panggil
so
orang
overwhelming.
putih. The next one
Thank
is
you.
orang.
Overwhelming. Yeah.
We need to keep moving. And Troy and then Rhiannon, and then we're gonna have to wrap up, unfortunately.
Semua dia punya orang
Troy,
putih.
Nera?
Oh, hi. My son is turning 21 next year. Next month, which will be his second birthday in hospital for an almost 12-month admission, currently. My question is, is there anybody, do we have any, I'm aware that the Minister for Health is also unfortunately the Minister for NDIS. Do we have any allies in the health system that can be trying to, there's got to be, you mentioned that, it's affecting the health system greatly. I think it's 2,600 people, I believe, that are stuck in hospital, NDIS participants, if that's the correct number. I wish it was just us. It appears it's really not. While my son loses muscle mass and can't access therapies, and the impact of the reality of what that actually means. And without a safe discharge, he can't leave. The NDIS left it till the point that I've got impinged nerves and herniated discs because they don't look after carers and they leave us for so long that we can't do it anymore. It's not mine or his want to be away from each other. We don't want him in a group home, and he's not even funded sufficiently to be safe for the first night he would be in a group home. So I guess what I'm raising is there anywhere that we can try and encourage other areas that will be affected, like health, like the poor nursing staff trying to deal with somebody who has complex disabilities and communication and behavioural needs on top of everything when they're already underfunded, the justice system, or how can we gather other allies to fight this? and to let the public know the impact of what this means. It's death, it's deterioration, and it's people stuck long term in hospital, unable to use NDIS funding for therapies. They've made us monthly, they've halved our therapy budget, they've done everything they can to stop us from evidencing his needs to get him out of there. Like, is there class actions for people stuck in hospitals? Like, is there allies that can band together to help try and stop this bill and fix what's already happening? There's got to be something, because this is dire already.
Can I ask you, I'm so sorry that you're in this situation. It's not okay. Can you please send us an email at info@enviouslandcouncil.com.au and we'll try to help. I don't know if we can, but it sounds like a diabolical situation, and I
It
don't
sounds
think
horrendous.
that.
It sounds horrendous. And I'm really sorry, but I'm gonna ask. Oh God, we should never be in the position where we've got to do this, but there, you should just. It's enough that you're experiencing this situation in your family, and you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have even had to have shared it here to get any action on it, let alone with anyone else. The cruel reality is that that outcome that you fear of your son going into a group home setting, that's that is now that's the outcome the government's working towards. Your family are the human face of what it practically means to be creating legislation that removes supports and tries to incentivize people to share or requires them to share supports and prevents them from having one-to-one supports. And I think what you've just shared with us all is incredibly impactful. And if you've got the energy to share that online, I think more people need to hear your story, because it's a visceral example of why we are fighting this bill together. I'm so sorry that it's happening to you and your family. It's unacceptable, and I just don't want it to be a situation where um, they feel like they can get away with doing this to you, because they shouldn't be allowed to get away with doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do need to wrap this session up. We have run out of time. Thank you to Jordon and Belinda and Naomi. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. This is a very difficult time. I know that people are going to probably be feeling even more concerned, because what we've heard today is the reality of what's facing our community, and the reality is truly very concerning. We can do things to address this. We can make submissions. We can speak to our neighbors, our friends, our family, and tell them to make submissions as well. And we can also speak to all of our members of parliament, not just in the House of Representatives, but also in the Senate as well. We all have senators who, like Jordan, are there to work for us and raise our concerns. So please do that before the 1st of June. It's really important that you do that, and that if you need help, Amber, can you put the link in the chat that shows people what they can do to have a say and to put in a submission, please? That would be good. Um, there's also information on our website. If you do need support, um, please call Lifeline of Young Blue, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Stay strong. There's hope while we have each other.